Welcome back to the chemical reactions model. Now that we have a model that has all the reactants and products, we are ready to do some experiments. In order to collect data, we need to add some instrumentation. So in this case, we're going to add a line graph. To do that, we need to go to the Edit Widget mode, click on New Widget, and we need to scroll down, and sometimes you have to click on that black bar on top before you could scroll down. So here in the widgets we have different options: push button, toggle button. We're going to choose line graph, and we're going to call that products over time. Hit edit widget. Now you see the graph shows up, and since we're in the edit widget mode, we can move things around. All these are called widgets. We can move them around. So I'm going to move the data box for silver up. I'm going to put the graph right here. And then I want to edit this graph a little bit more. So where it says series 1, we want to double click on that and change that to silver, because we're going to be graphing the amount of silver produced or deposited over time. And we can click on the black square and change the color of our line graph even. So I'm going to choose gray. Accept. Now, we can also change the titles on the axes. What we do is double click on the top of the graph. You see the title of the graph is right there, and here the time is going to be measured on the x-axis, and on the y-axis is going to be the count of silver, or the count of agents, or the count of atoms. So we're just going to put count or population. Okay, I think this is it for the interface. So we need to exit the edit widget mode. And now that we have this line graph, we need to go to the workspace and do some coding for it. So in the world is where we want to put this coding for the graph, because we want it to be updated at all times. So we go to the interface drawer and we pick the while forever is toggled block. While forever is toggled block, which means we want this data, this line graph, to update while forever is running, where all the steps in forever are running. So again, in the interface, since that's where the line graph is, if you look in the interface drawer here, there should be a block that has to do with the line graph, and here it is. Add graph, add data to line graph, and the graph we have is called products over time. We are going to be adding data to collect information for the silver deposited. Let's move this over this way. Now what's going to go on the x-axis is the time, and the time is in the environment drawer. There's a clock block, and that will keep track of time. And anytime you use the clock block, make sure in your setup that you have actually zeroed the clock. So here it is, set clock to 0. The other thing is, now that we are forming a graph, we also need to clear the graph. So also we need to add something here after clear terrain, delete everyone, set the clock to 0. We need to also set the graph to 0. And where would that be? I guess it's in the interface drawer again. In the interface drawer, there should be a block that says clear graph, and here it is, clear line graph. And I'm just going to add that right after set the clock to 0, and make sure you click on the title of that graph, because you might have more than one graph. Okay, back to this block. So the x-axis will be time. Well, what is on the y-axis? Well, the y-axis is going to be the count of silver deposited. So that would be in detection. In detection is where you have this count block. And the count block is pretty flexible. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to count silver. And the flexibility here is it wants to know for how many steps, okay? Because you can count agents within a certain number of steps. But if you put 200 steps, then that covers the whole spaceland. Remember that spaceland has an x-axis that starts from -50 to 50, and y-axis that goes from -50 to 50. So you have 101 steps in each dimension. So 200 steps across everywhere, it covers everywhere in spaceland. All right, now that we've got this code, let's click on Run Code, Save, and let's try it. So now I'm going to click on Setup, Add Copper Strip, Add Silver Nitrate, and click Forever, and let's see if the graph is going to work. Okay, so the model is working, however the graph is not updating. No big deal. Sometimes this happens, and what you need to do is one more step, and that step is you need to refresh. So make sure you have saved your work and then refresh the screen. And once you refresh, you will see the graph. Well, we don't see the graph and we don't see any of the other buttons. So what happened here? This is another small glitch depending on your browser. So if you resize your browser and resize it again, so you go maximize, minimize, you see that everything comes back. Okay, now let's click on Run Code, Setup, Add Copper Strip, Add Silver Nitrate, and click Forever. And here we go. Now we have the graph working. So we needed to refresh the program, and sometimes you need to resize your window, maximize it, minimize it, and all the widgets come back. So now let's watch over this graph a little bit, and you see that over time the count of silver atoms, which is also counted here in the data box, but now it's plotted over time in this line graph, you see that of course more and more silver are being produced. However, let's see what the shape of this graph looks like. This graph is useful to study the rate of the reaction. The rate of the reaction is how fast the products are created over time, or how fast the reactants are used up over time. So try this for yourself, add a line graph, and use the experimental design form to start designing an experiment. And as you see here, how the graph slows down, eventually levels off because we ran out of one of the reactants, and in this case we ran out of the copper. Okay, so go ahead and try it for yourself. Thank you.